Okay. Welcome, everyone. My name is Jessie McEntee. I work.
We arrived at December of 1989. Now we have to think back in history and remember what happened at that period. By then, all of the former communist states had changed from communism to democracies of one form or another. The Berlin Wall fell at the beginning of December, and the only remaining country still communist was Romania. And all the other countries evolved into democracy peacefully. The Velvet Revolution, they called it. So why is Romania the sole holdout? Boris orders him to come to Bucharest to create history. Now you have to understand, he doesn't know who Boris is. He doesn't know how Boris fits into any part of the story. He doesn't really want to go, but his superiors order him to go for two reasons. One, we really have to find out who Boris is. He's been giving us this great asset, this great intelligence over all this period. So he's also got another reason. And the other one is that he has a childhood sweetheart that he left behind when he was 8. So the book follows Heflin as he morphs from an analyst into a field agent. That's the spy thriller part. As he tries to find his Pusha and what happened to her. And as the revolution starts in Timișoara, which is this city in Transylvania, and then spreads to Bucharest. Keep talking a little bit while I catch my breath here.
Oh, gosh. It's an incredibly juicy story. I love how you're starting with so much conflict and so much tension. You clearly have studied the mechanics of writing for a long time. So was this your first novel attempt, or how many novels do you have under your belt? Tell us about that process.
About 3. The first novel, well, I started writing when I was in 7th grade, actually, which is a great thing. I had a great teacher, Miss Garbett. I remember her forever. She taught me 2 things: grammar, which I know pretty well, and she wanted everybody to write short stories. So we started writing short stories. And I wrote a short story that she liked, and she had me read it in front of the class, and I got applause. So I was hooked. And since then, I wrote while I was at Harvard, while I was, studying medicine and pre-med and so forth. But I've always wanted to be a writer. I considered medicine simply a way of making a living and making my parents proud. But when I told them I wanted to be a writer, they said, "Get out of here, go get a degree." Go get a real profession.
Right. Do you perceive that as being part of the immigrant experience, or is it just particular to your parents?
Oh, absolutely. You come here, you're terrified. You don't know the language. You don't know the customs. The fear that goes through you is one of the image. I remember my mother and father used to say, being left alone to starve in the gutter. That's their image of being immigrant, with no one to help. We had some relatives here who came before us who helped us, but that's pretty much it. My father was a doctor also, but he didn't have, they don't recognize the degrees that you get in Europe. You have to go through the whole process again of passing exams and getting another residency. So he was 52 at the time.
Wow.
So he had to learn English, then learn medicine in English by reading Harrison's internal medicine book. I remember it to this day. And then pass his exams, which he did on the first try, and then started practicing 55, 56, I can't remember.
Wow. That's
So,
incredible.
yeah. I
And
went to, no, go
go
ahead.
ahead. Oh, I was going to ask, so in your biography, it said that you were of Greek extraction. So were your parents Greek immigrants to Romania and then immigrants to
Yeah,
America?
well, that's the funny part. We're like professional immigrants. I call us gypsies.
Oh, gosh.
And I don't want to insult the gypsies in any way, but I grew up with gypsies around us in Romania. They are officially called the Roma, Roma.
Mhm.
The gypsy word actually, it's funny where it comes from. It comes from the Greek Egyptos, which means Egyptian. So in the
Mm,
Middle Ages, they thought the gypsies came from Egypt. They
mm,
actually come from India.
yeah.
So
Wow.
the name is wrong, but that's how they were. They got to be known, right? So I had a lot of gypsy friends when I was growing up there. They're not well treated
Mm,
in Romania, even
right.
to this day,
Mm,
which draws a lot of parallels to my family because my parents came from northern Greece,
mm,
which Greece was poor at the time, and a lot of people went to Romania to, make their fortunes, right? Because
mhm,
Romania, between First and Second World War, was a um, democratic country. It had a parliament, had a
mm,
king, much like England,
mhm,
and so one could go there and start a business or a restaurant, and a lot of Greeks did that during that period. So my parents
mm,
met in Romania, actually, while my father was studying medicine, and married after the war. My father was drafted into the Romanian army in World
oh,
War II, even though he was a Greek citizen,
mhm,
which was another story altogether. He
yeah.
went to Stalingrad
Oh,
on the wrong side because
oh,
Romania at the time was an ally of Germany for half the
uh-huh.
war.
Oh,
And
gosh.
then in the middle of it all, Romania changed sides
Yeah.
and joined the US and the rest of England and so forth. And the Russians never forgot the fact that the Romanians fought with the Germans for the first
Mm,
half of the war, and after the end of the war, Romania was given as part of the Soviet Union sphere of influence.
mm,
So the Russian army came in, made Romania communist, and it became a closed state. My parents couldn't leave after that, and
yeah.
my brother and I were born there. So that is my history. What else? What was the
Can
question
I,
again?
can I psychoanalyze you for a moment?
Now go ahead.
Okay. So do you think that this transient background contributes to your ability to embody different fictional characters?
But not only that, but if you look at the history of a lot of writers, they all are or feel like they are outsiders.
Right. Misfits.
Okay, they are observers. They're not
Hmm.
really part of the action. They always stand to one side and look at the action. I remember in class growing up here in grammar school and high school, I always had the last row corner seat. From there,
Mm,
I could see the entire class, observe it, see what's going on. And that's kind of how I see myself, as an observer of life. And a lot of
hmm,
writers feel that way for one reason or another. They're not all, immigrants, but something or other in their character, personality makes them into observers rather than being part of a group. In fact, I hate groups.
hmm.
I don't belong to any group.
I think it's so interesting that you became a doctor, though. That must have kind of counteracted some of those. I mean, obviously, you need keen skills of observation to be a doctor, but it does. How did that feel with having to interact with patients regularly? And
Oh, I'm fine with that. I'm fine. I'm very social. I'm just,
Right.
that's not a problem.
Yeah. There's so
Now,
much overlap between doctors and writers. I mean, there are some,
well, there is,
fantastic
because,
doctors slash writers.
yeah, you learn a lot about human nature. You will learn
Hmm.
other things. You learn how to observe how people
Right.
walk, how they stand, how they talk. I mean, they teach you to do that in medical school in order to diagnose an illness, but you can
Hmm.
use it to, from a psychological point of view, to
Right.
it tells you how people think of themselves, of the world, how they walk, how they talk, what
Mm.
pitch they use. You know, there are people who raise their pitch when they're afraid or when they feel
Mm.
subservient. When they're calmer, the pitch goes down.
Mm.
A lot of things you can observe by being a doctor from about your characters. And I always wanted to be a psychiatrist.
Mm.
So I went into medicine for that. But then when I was graduating, uh, psychiatry became all of a sudden a pharmaceutical company.
Mm. Yeah,
The
yeah.
profession changed dramatically during those years. And I didn't want to be a pharmacist. I mean, that's,
Mm.
therapy what kind of went out the window. Insurance companies didn't support it. Um,
Mm.
I mean, you could be an analyst only in like New York City where people could
Mm.
afford you for a
Right.
few years. It just became a different profession. But my
Right.
interest in psychology continued. So
Mm.
that helps in writing also.
Right,
Now,
right.
the other thing that you must be, when you're a writer and you go to writing class, they always tell you, write what you know.
Hmm.
Okay. But it isn't that simple because life doesn't give you events or characters on a platter.
Hmm.
There is a form to fiction. Okay. I mean,
Right.
go back to Aristotle, the 3-act play. We use that in novels also, though, you can change it, make it a 2-act or 1-act play, but most of the time it's 3 acts. And there are very, different parts to each act. And when you write and you use events or characters, I mean, I collect characters in my notebooks, I collect events.
Mm.
You can't just write them down the way it happened. I mean, because the first time a student gets criticized about a short story, his response or her response is, but it's true. That's how it happened,
That's
right?
how it happened, right?
Who cares how it happened? You are not supposed to be loyal to the truth of how it happened
Hmm.
in your life. You are loyal only to one thing, the story. And the story has to be formed. It doesn't come to you, on a platter. So you have to form the parts that you get from your life and use other parts from somebody else's life or what you saw on TV or what you read in the book and create a story.
Hmm.
So in this book, there are a lot of parts that happen to me, but not in the same way. So I was a guest, for instance, at a gathering of actors and directors. And there was a scene similar to the one in the book where one of the great actors of Romania came up to me to thank me for bringing whiskey because they couldn't get whiskey and I could get it from the tourist shops, which only accepted dollars. So he got a little drunk because everybody loves whiskey. And so he started babbling and he started saying, tell me, is it true that the play Tribute, which was on Broadway at the time, was written especially for Jack Lemmon? And I had never heard that. But I'm looking into this man's eyes. He's like the Laurence Olivier of Romania. And he's still craving for me to say yes.
Mm.
So I said, I heard that too, I mean, but it's not so rare in America. I say, for great actors, people do write plays for them in movies. And his eyes became, warm and just said, in another life. But he was on the Central Committee, but he made fun of the communists. He made fun of communism. Everybody makes fun of communism, made fun of communism. Nobody believed in it. They were just playing along to get along. And
Right.
the apparatchiks in charge of the country was stealing money from the government and from the people. So that is the world that this book takes place in. With the revolution in the background. What happened in the revolution is that Nikolai and Elena Ceausescu tried to flee with a helicopter from the rooftop of the Central Committee building, which is like their parliament or whatever. When there were over 100,000 people in front of the building demanding the downfall of communism, and they were eventually caught in a small town. They were put on trial, which lasted about 45 minutes, and they were summarily shot, executed, both of them, the one and two. And the question that remains to this day, if you go to Romania, is, was this a real revolution, or was it a coup d'etat? And if it was a coup, who was involved? Was there another outside force involved? Most people today think Gorbachev, the Russians, were involved in the coup. A lot of generals in the Romanian army were, we find out, KGB agents. But I have another theory, which I put forth in the book, as to who was behind the revolution. Because if you think about it, why did it have to be so bloody? The only bloody revolution at the time, all the other countries had a velvet revolution. And what happened after that? What happened after that is this leader, new leader, Iliescu, who used to be communist himself, wanted a Gorbachev-style socialist system with glasnost and perestroika, if you remember. And the people were so angry at the slaughter that occurred during the revolution that they would have none of it. They demanded the communists and the socialists, or anybody who even spoke the words, to be drummed out of office. So he became a Democrat, capitalist overnight. So who stands to gain by having a bloody revolution? America. The Russians could have just had a simple, quiet coup.
Right.
They didn't need a bloody revolution with 1,500, 2,000 people dying. So that's part of the plot of the book.
At what point did you start? Are you an outliner? Did the story come? There's that E.L. Doctorow quote that you for some writers, they it's about the headlights, and you're driving a car at night and you can only see as far as the headlights will illuminate, meaning that as you write the story, it unfolds for you.
That is how I write.
Okay.
As I write, it opens up for some reason. Now I start with a few ideas, right? Sometimes I know the ending. Sometimes I know a few spots in the middle. They always change by the time you get to write it. But you need something to start out with. I knew I was going to write about the revolution. I knew I was going to write a love story about Pusha, the girl that the boy left behind. There was a real Pusha, by the way, but I never found her again. But the girl becomes a mythological figure in his mind. The ultimate love that he measures every other love that he
Mhm.
encounters in his life. And so this is how I write. I write notes, I write scenes all over the place. And then I begin to write. And then
Mhm.
sometimes I check off the ideas as I include them in the book. I check them off the page. But a lot of other times it goes in a different direction. So
Mhm.
no, so I can't outline the book in my mind. Uh,
Right.
it becomes too simple. And then,
Mhm.
and then the writing isn't fun. The whole
Right,
fun
right.
of writing is writing to figure out what you're writing about.
Mhm.
And so
Do you feel that does plot come more easily to you? Do characters come more easily? Is it kind of a
characters come
combination?
more, characters come
Mhm.
more easily with a generalized plot in mind. But plot has to be complex, has to be scene
Right.
by scene. How do those scenes come about? They come about by strings. You create, well, I learned that from, what's his name? You quoted him, that I took a whole year class with him.
Oh, Doctorow?
I know, not Dr. O. Anyway, it'll come to me.
Mhm.
But his whole idea was, how do you connect one sentence to another, one paragraph to another, one chapter to another? And you connect them with words and thoughts. So if you know, talk about darkness in one sentence or one paragraph, you have to start the next one with something having to do with darkness or black,
Mhm.
or if you talk about loyalty in the first paragraph, you continue with loyalty, but then you go on somewhere else. So there has to be links between.
Mhm.
You can't start all of a sudden unless a new chapter. So these links actually help you write, helps
Mhm.
your thinking process, because it flows like a river, and it pushes you on to other ideas as you're writing.
Mhm.
So that's the way I write. I mean, some people tell me they write the plot and then they fill in the blanks.
Mhm.
Then what's the point?
Right, right. What deep psychological need is driving your protagonist in the story? What draws him back to the country of his birth that he's since left?
Well, yes. Well, first of all, it's his job. He's ordered to go. But
Mhm.
beyond that, it's the love that he craves. It's his
Mhm.
lost childhood. I mean, you lose your childhood when you are yanked away at age 6 or 7 or 8. You lose all your friends, you lose all the language, the
Mhm.
customs, the food, everything. You lose the sense of home. And then you have to start all over again. You have to
Mhm.
learn a new language. I mean, I had to do that twice because I lived
Wow.
in a refugee camp in Greece for 2 years. So does my character. I'm sorry, my phone is ringing, but so I first learned Greek when I was in the refugee camp. I went to first and second grade in Greece, and then I came here to learn the language all over again, English. So
Mhm.
I speak 3 languages now, but
Wow.
it
Mhm.
was it wasn't pleasant at the time. But
Mhm.
it's funny how children learn, though.
Mhm.
I remember coming here in November and not knowing a word of English.
Mhm.
Then December 23rd, I remember the teacher conversing with me about what I was going to buy my parents for Christmas.
Right.
Where I learned it, I don't know. I remember shrugging
That's
my shoulders the first day of school, not knowing anything they were telling me. And then
right.
in a month and a half, that's why I'm totally against bilingual education for kids coming from abroad. You learn by total immersion.
Mhm.
If you want to learn a new language, immersion is the way to do it. and kids learn like, pick it up like a sponge. I mean,
Mhm.
they learn very quickly.
That's incredible. So tell me about your research process. Did it take you back to Romania?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I was going to Romania all the time. Um, so I spoke to a lot of people there who went through the revolution during
Mhm.
during that time. But I had known about the country after going back so many times. I started after my senior year of high school to go back every year or two. And I remember spending a summer there one time. So I learned a lot about the language, the society. I read a lot about the revolution,
Mm.
many books. There are many articles, both in English and Romanian, which I can read. So I did a lot of research. Everything in the book is accurate, except for where they don't know what happened.
Mm.
So when they don't know what happened, when there's no evidence of exactly what happened, I use poetic license and insert my own ideas.
Fiction.
It's
Right.
fiction by the end.
Yeah.
So it's never been proven that General Stănculescu, who was part of the revolution, was a CIA asset.
Mm.
But there are photographs of him meeting CIA men in East Germany in 1985. So, is the CIA going to tell me that he was an asset? No, but I can make a guess.
Of course.
So,
Well, this relates back to what you said earlier. That you're trying your purpose as a fiction writer is to entertain or to edify or right. And I think it's wonderful that you're sticking to that purpose instead of sticking to the facts are not going to make for the best story.
yes, but there are historical facts you can't play around with. I mean, Ceausescu's trial is on YouTube. You can
Right.
listen to it. Even the execution is on YouTube.
Wow.
But they don't quite get the actual shooting because
Mm.
the soldiers were so eager to kill them that they started shooting before the photographer reached them to film it. But the
Mm.
photographer does show the bodies on the floor,
Oh,
on
right.
the ground. So yeah, you can't change a lot of these things in history, but you can
Mm.
write a historical novel and fill in with your own fictional characters, or if you're going to use a real character, fill in dialogue and ideas that you have no way of knowing otherwise.
Mm. Right. Absolutely. This is such a fascinating chat. If any of our participants want to type questions into the chat feature, we can always work in your questions as well. I have another question in the meantime, William. So did you have the sense when you finished the first book that were these characters just calling you back immediately, or how did that happen with writing a follow-up, a second book based on,
Well, there are a lot of I fell in love with the characters like you're supposed
Mhm.
to as a writer, and you kind of don't want to, give them up.
Mm.
And there are a lot of open questions left
Mm.
in the first book. So I wanted to tie some of those ends up and maybe open up some other ones. But the second book deals with what happened after the revolution. It's called The Bucharest Legacy. And the reason is it has a lot to do with what happened everywhere else in the communist countries, including Russia. What happened was the oligarchs appeared. Who are the oligarchs? The oligarchs, like in Russia, were all former Secret Servicemen, all part of the Securitate. They had several things that nobody else had. They had dossiers full of secrets, full of things, skeletons they knew were buried in every person's life. And they could blackmail judges, parliamentarians, even the president into giving them, the first thing they did is they forced the government to give them the newly privatized companies that all the communist countries had to do there, that everything was owned by the government under communism. If you're going to become a democracy, you have to privatize. Well,
Mm.
who does who takes over these companies when you privatize them? Everything was crooked, like I told you. So a lot of these things were given to friends and to Securitate men, and because they could blackmail the government officials. And then there is a that's my wife, I know it is. So they became millionaires overnight. And it happened in Russia too. That happened in Czechoslovakia, or the Czech Republic now is, in Poland, in Hungary. Right now you have okay, give me a second. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
She forgot.
No.
So the Bucharest Legacy is subtitled "The Rise of the Oligarchs." So it shows the corruption that occurred and the rise of the millionaires and billionaires that are to this day running Romania. It doesn't matter who the government is, and they run the show. So you think you live in a democracy in Romania, you don't.
Interesting. How has the internet affected the state of affairs in Romania? Has it led to more transparency, or?
Of the government? No. All the Securitate files still remain secret. The new Securitate is led by the same old people that led the old Securitate. They are still listening to everybody.
Okay.
And yet they're part of NATO and the EU, as is Hungary.
Right.
Hungary is using EU money to give to their relatives and friends and former Secret Service people that are becoming billionaires on EU money. And so are the Romanians. Their standard of living has increased dramatically. That's true. Everybody has a cell phone. It looks like any other European city right now. But behind it all, nobody knows what happened in the revolution. Nobody knows how the new regime came to power. All sorts of laws that are required by the EU in order to join them are passed, but never followed. So all of these former Soviet satellite countries are in the bottom of corruption lists in Europe. So
did you feel threatened at all while you were doing your research? Was there ever a moment when you thought that you shouldn't continue?
No. They treated me like a stupid college kid, roaming around. Like I said, my friends and relatives were questioned, but no, I didn't have any background in espionage. I mean, they weren't interested in me, but they knew of me. They knew where I went all the time.
Right.
They had pictures of me.
Right. How did you uncover information about the CIA?
Research on the internet. I don't have any direct connection to the CIA. I was never approached by the CIA while I was at Harvard, but I couldn't tell you even if I was, so what the hell. But no, I don't divulge anything secret in the book about how the CIA functions. If you've read books, seen movies about the CIA, you know how they function, at least in fiction.
Right. So. Is your favorite genre to read spy novel, or what do you read for fun?
It is, but I also read a lot of classics. My favorite author is Lawrence Durrell, who was a British author, lived in Corfu. I actually visited his home. It's a hotel now, unfortunately, but his style of writing has gone out of fashion. It's a very Proustian type of long, convoluted sentences with a lot of dependent clauses and so forth, but it's beautiful.
Right.
So, But you know, in the genre, Alan First is a great author. He writes a lot about World War II
Mm,
from various points of view, from a spy's point of view. But he doesn't use the same characters twice. So
mm,
every book is a new book. A guy named Joseph Cannon, you probably know of,
mm,
Owen Steinhauer. These are all great.
mm,
I mean, obviously Jean le Carré, I love,
mm.
but nobody can mimic Jean le Carré.
So tell me about your current writing process. How many hours a day do you work? What is that like now that you're writing full time?
I start in the morning. That's my
Uh-huh.
best time because well, it is because I used to be a night person because I worked
Okay.
all day, you know, and then I would write at night when I got home from work. But
Wow.
yeah, now I write first thing in the morning. My wife's a surgeon. She goes off to work.
Mm,
So after a few cups of coffee, yeah, I start writing. A lot of stuff happens while you sleep. See,
mm,
you go to bed thinking about your problem because there's always a problem. What is my character going to do next? Somebody
right.
famous said, but if you don't know what your character is going to do next, she's got to kill somebody. That's always good.
Right, right.
But you're thinking, where is this going? So while you're sleeping, it's, you know, you're working on it. So in the
Mm-hmm.
morning, you come up with new ideas and you start writing. The thing
Mm,
that a lot of young writers need to realize is rewriting. Writing is
mm-hmm.
rewriting. For me, 50% of what I write gets thrown in the garbage can eventually. But
Right. Yeah.
you know, as you're shaping, and or you may start off in the wrong direction and then you realize it and then go in the right direction. That, you know, those 200 pages go out the window.
Right.
So, and you keep rewriting until you get it better and better. It's like polishing
Mm-hmm.
diamond, you know. So, uh, you know, the first version, you really shouldn't care about, um, you know, how it fits in the whole scheme of things. If you had a scene in your brain and your mind, write the damn scene. Figure out how that scene is going to fit later. You're going to change parts of it, but the whole, if it's a beautiful scene, write it and see later how you're going to make use of it. And don't be afraid of, you know, your style not being as good. You're going to fix your style
Mm-hmm.
on the rewrites. And you're going to polish it. And you're going to make it more graceful, or for instance, if it's a fast occurring scene like an action scene, you may want to make a staccato sentences, short, fast
Mm-hmm.
sentences. That's one way of doing it. Some authors make a slow down time, and they
Mm-hmm.
do that by making long sentences and describing, you know, he lifted his finger and then he pulled on it, you know, describing every minute detail as if you're watching a
Right.
slow motion movie. That's a way of slowing down time.
Right.
So you got to decide how to do that. These are all decisions you have to make. Uh,
Right. And that
so
is in a way that is in keeping with real life. When we're in a stressful situation, we are more attuned to sensory information. And
that's right.
so,
It's sometimes,
mm,
I know when I was in a car accident, that time did slow down.
right, right. You have that sensation for sure.
Yeah.
Mm. So do
So
you have what is your third book? What are you working on now?
it is another spy thriller. It can't tell you much about it, but it's not the two characters
Okay.
in the first two. It's a separate novel. So
Right, right.
it still has
Mm,
post post-communist Eastern Europe.
okay. Mm,
You know, there's a
I
lot
love,
of stuff going on now in Ukraine and all of this that is
mhm,
so close to how things were. I mean, in Russia, we're going backwards to
mm,
a state of totalitarianism without calling it communism. But
Mhm.
You can't stand up and complain. You can't march on the street. You'd be
Mm.
arrested. You have only propaganda to listen to. I mean, I don't
Mm.
even talk about the propaganda, but people in Romania had 2 channels on TV, and all that was on those channels was showing Ceausescu visiting a factory or children
Mm.
seeing how great communism is.
Right.
So they were all brainwashed into,
Mhm.
they listened to the BBC and the Voice of America at night, which is what's safe.
Mm. Wow.
So a lot of this is happening right now. I mean, right now we have the internet, which makes it easier.
Mm.
Yeah.
How did publishing your first book change your process?
Didn't change my process. What it did is it forced me to be faster.
Okay.
It took me 3 years to write the first book. Now they want a book a
Mhm.
year.
Mm. Right. It's
How
such
do
is
you
the
do a
state of
book a year?
publishing.
Yeah, I know.
Right, right.
Oh, they'll forget about you in a year or two. You got to keep it, how am I going to produce a War and Peace in a year? I don't think so, but
Yeah.
that's what they want. So we'll see.
Right. Is there anything that you forced yourself to edit out of this book that, that's still on your mind, or
Oh
did you just
my
have a
God.
very objective view of it?
This book was about, 400 pages originally. A lot of
Okay.
it, I'm sorry, a lot of it was showing the ambiance in Romania,
Mm.
more examples of their suffering,
Mm.
some other small subplots that had nothing to do with the main plots. And
Mm.
the editors at the publishing house cut them out. They wanted less than 100,000 words.
Okay.
It said most people, especially in a first novel,
Mm.
want to read something longer. I think once you write a few novels, then the publishers allow you to make them longer.
Right, right. Yeah, you have to be an established brand. And then
Yeah.
it's funny, I teach fiction classes, and I say that to my students a lot. I say, because this is all there, that no one's published as of yet. And I say, when you're looking for a comp title to compare your book to, you should look to other debut novelists, because debut novelists have to play by different rules. Once you're more of a brand, I think you do have more leeway, but
Stephen King can do whatever he wants. I mean,
that's
at this
true.
point, he can probably
He was
buy.
breaking in at a very different time in the industry, though.
That's true too. That's true
Right,
too.
right. Now
But
with
he
the
can buy his own
consolidation of,
publishing. He can buy his own
right.
publishing house then right now. But no, I mean, there are a lot of authors who become money houses for the publishing firms. They
Mhm.
produce so many books and sell them all over the world that they become millionaires, and so does the publishing house. You have to think about the economics of publishing. I mean, on the average, you get about 10 to 15% of a book.
Right.
So if a book sells for $25, you get $2.50 or $3 a book. You
Right.
have to sell a heck of a lot of books to even think
Mhm.
about making a living.
Right, right.
And if it takes you 3 years to write it,
Mm.
you need another
Right.
profession. I
Yeah,
read
yeah.
somewhere that over 90% of writers have another profession.
Oh, absolutely. I can believe it.
And I think
Yeah.
actors are the same too in what is it, SAG, their actors union.
Hmm.
Most of them have other professions when they're not. I mean, they're bartenders or whatever,
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
While you were practicing medicine, did you find yourself coming up with, plots or characters on the spot while you were working, or were you able to compartmentalize?
oh no, I always carried a notebook,
Mm.
so I always wrote down things whenever they came up. A lot of
Yeah.
them were use, but a lot of them I did. So, if you don't write it down, it just goes away and never comes back, or comes back
Right.
in another form. But so I always write ideas down as I walk around.
Mhm.
But I didn't want to write about medicine.
Uh-huh.
And just, there are a lot of doctors who write about medicine, and I don't know. I just want to keep the two separate.
Yeah, right. Mm. Did you consider turning either of your two novels into a screenplay?
Well, as a matter of fact,
Mm.
I have interest from producers in Hollywood to
Oh,
buy
that's exciting.
the film rights. So
Uh-huh.
we'll see what happens.
Right, right, right.
That
Oh,
doesn't mean
wonderful.
anything, though. It doesn't mean anything. When they buy the rights, film companies in Hollywood buy so many
Mhm.
book rights, and then they produce
Right,
so few of them.
right, right.
So you just
There's
have
a chance.
there's a chance.
There's a chance. Who knows? Well, you defied the odds in getting published to begin with, which is an incredible achievement. So,
Well, I'm a late bloomer. I should have been 20 when I did this, but you can't do much writing when you're doing medicine.
yeah. I mean, I think a lot of writers don't come into their own in terms of their voice until they're at least 40. I mean, you're an aberration if you do. You need those years of experience for sure. So is there an Achilles heel that you can identify in your own writing? Is there like an element of craft that just doesn't come easily to you? Or do you have any?
Plot doesn't come easily to me. Plot does
Mhm.
not come easily. That's why I have to work through it to find the plot.
Mm.
And then layer it. You have to layer plots because you have to have more than one plot. You have to have subplots.
Mhm.
So in the book, there's the plot of the love story, there's the plot of the spy thriller, there's the plot of the revolution. They're all kind of traveling on different levels, but they have interconnections.
Right.
That's a tricky thing to do. And you
Mhm.
can't do them simultaneously. You have to take each plot, write it out, and follow it where it leads, and then write the other one out. And then you decide how are these things going to play together.
Right, right. But of course, they also have to echo each other, at least to some extent,
Oh, absolutely.
which is part of what makes it so tricky.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So in this case, did the spy story come to you first, or did the love story come? What was how did that
The
proceed?
revolution came first.
Okay.
The love story came second.
Hmm.
So I'm thinking, okay, he goes back during the revolution to find his true love.
Hmm.
How does he go back? Why does he go back?
Hmm.
Who would go back in the middle of a revolution? And why
Right.
hasn't he gone back before? So all these questions start coming up. So then you say,
Mm.
oh, he's got to have a good reason for going there during the revolution. So
Mm.
then I said, I've always wanted to write a spy story, the kind that I always want to read. Let's see if I can do it.
Mm.
Because
That's
the other
wonderful.
books that I wrote up until then were not about spies or stuff.
Mm. What were
Uh,
they about?
well, hopefully one will be, I don't have a contract yet, but hopefully one will be
Mhm.
published in a year or
Right.
so. It's called The Cure.
Uh-huh.
It asks the question, what would the government do if tomorrow somebody decided the cure, they found the cure for aging?
Mm.
Now, what that means is that you take a pill or injection or whatever, and you look like you're 20 again in a few months.
Mm.
Now, they've done this with mice.
Mm.
They took blood from young mice and put them into old mice, and the old mice started looking and feeling and running like young mice again.
Mm.
And then now they're trying to isolate exactly what does that. But the problem with making that public is that the whole world is running on the assumption that people are going to age and die.
Right.
Economy runs on that, everything runs on that. You know, you're married till death do us part. Well, if you're never going to
Mhm.
die, what's going to happen to marriage, right? You have to have few children, otherwise there's going to be
Right.
overpopulation. In fact, the whole population is going to be old mentally,
Mm.
but they're going to look young.
Uh,
You look at someone, you don't know whether she's 20 or 200 or
mm.
1,000 years old.
Wow.
And how would you treat somebody differently when they're 20 or 200?
Mm.
And by
Right,
200,
right.
they've seen everything, done everything.
Yeah. They've written lots of books by then.
Yeah. So that's what the book is about. It's a thriller, but it's also an intellectual thriller. It's
Wow.
what would the government do? And the
Uh-huh.
answer is they would try to keep it secret
Right, right.
because it would,
Wow, that sounds incredible.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
I don't see any questions as of yet. How about this? If you have a question, raise your hand by pressing. If you scroll over the bottom of your screen, you should see the option to raise your hand, and then I can unmute you to ask your question. Any takers? Oh, let's see. We have one raised hand. Let me. I'm so sorry. I'm having a little, oh, there we go. Okay. Hi. I'm sorry. I'm going to
Yes.
mispronounce your name. Hi.
Hi. Yeah, no, the question I had was, I'm curious, what type of medicine did you choose that you thought would allow you to also have writing?
That's a very profound question, because that's exactly how I chose my profession, with writing in mind.
Mm.
So I didn't want to have my own practice because it's a real pain. You have to be in charge of everything, hiring, firing, books, the works. So I became an anesthesiologist.
Yeah.
I had a 9 to 5 or 7 to 5 job. And when I came home, I didn't have any patients to worry about.
Mm.
See, so I came home, I drank some coffee, had a light dinner, and then wrote till about midnight, and then
Wow.
start all over again at 5:30.
Wow. That is very admirable. Yeah.
Thank you. I just love doing it, so it wasn't that hard.
Right. Do you find that writing energizes you?
A whole different part of your brain opens up. You almost feel it.
Mhm.
You know, medicine is all rote. It's all memory.
Mm.
It's all, you have to know protocols. You have to know if this happens, this is what you do.
Mm.
And in anesthesia, people may not know a lot about it, but we control everything in the operating room. Something wrong happens, the surgeon puts his hands up and says, do something to me.
Mm.
So you have to act quickly. You don't have time to think.
Mm.
All protocols. It's a whole different part of your brain that's working to memorize.
Mm.
At Harvard, we didn't memorize anything. We had open book tests. They were all problems. Even in literature, even in psychology classes, they were all problems. You know, compare this writer to that writer, and tell me how, you know, what you think about them. That was the kind of questions. When you go to medical school, I didn't like it very much. It's there was no creativity involved there.
Yeah. Do you ever, this is a little hard to describe, and I don't know if we have other attendees who are writers as well, but I find as a writer that my most fruitful moments are when I can kind of turn off my conscious brain and just let the subconscious brain somehow take over. It's almost that sensation, you know, 5 hours go by.
Yeah.
You don't remember what you wrote necessarily. You might wake up the next day and not even, you know, and you'll be looking over what you generated. And it's kind of like, oh, that was good.
Oh,
I did
absolutely.
well.
I sometimes look at it and go, who the hell wrote this?
I know.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel paranoid that maybe I'm right. Like maybe I've generated like 70,000 words and I have little panic dreams that like I open up the document and I just wrote like the 70,000 times. But or sometimes your subconscious brain, tell me if this rings true with you. I think that sometimes your subconscious brain can also almost anticipate plot points that you don't like. It takes your conscious brain a while to catch up, and then you feel really clever. But I don't know where that comes from.
This is why I tell you I write in the morning a lot, because a lot of that has been going on while I'm sleeping.
Okay.
And you get a lot of ideas and you don't know where they come from. And it's analogous to what I said about learning a new language. You remember when you didn't know it, and then you remember when you were speaking fluently, but you can't remember the months in between. It's the same with a novel. I remember starting it. I remember finishing it, but I don't remember any doing the work in the middle. I was in a different zone.
Right.
And
do you ever feel that you're pushed out of that zone? Do you get writer's
Oh,
block?
yeah. Well, phone calls like those, I mean,
Right.
or, all sorts of things. So many times I go away,
Right.
tell my wife, okay, I'll see you in 2 weeks or something.
Mhm.
And I go to New York City and
Yeah.
I'm there. So,
Right.
and sometimes you just stay in that zone all day. You forget.
Mhm. Yeah.
And you can be
I think writing is sometimes very close to acting. I'm not an actor, so maybe I shouldn't say that, but I do feel like, channeling these characters and letting them flow through you or right.
Well, absolutely. And in fact, you're playing all characters at the same time, one character. Yeah.
Right.
So there are a lot of female characters, and I try to get into their brains, and what would a woman think like or do in this situation,
Right,
But,
right.
I mean, that's just a wonderful state of mind to be in, and then get paid for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else? Raise your hand if you have a question and I'll admit you. No? All right. Well, this has been a fascinating evening, William. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's been great for me too. And I hope you have students who have been listening or will listen and maybe get some ideas.
Absolutely.
But I was in their place many years ago, and it takes forever to get published. Tell them, not to give up.
It does. It does. And I love all of your insights about the editorial process. It's so important to realize that, I think a lot of people feel very exuberant after they've written that first draft or, maybe revised it once, maybe twice, but they're not even, they barely started.
One more thing. I saw an article in the Wall Street Journal, which I may show it to you, but it talks about authors who go to book signings for their books. And there's this debut author who says, I go to book signings and nobody shows up, or just one person, or maybe three of my friends. And she put that online, and then she got responses from all sorts of famous writers who said, welcome to writing. He says, those are what we've all gone through, those when nobody shows up, when it's just you and your host talking.
Right.
So,
but this is the process, and you're doing what you love, and hopefully you're getting enough out of.
Absolutely.
Right.
I believe we have 10 people or 8 people here. I mean, that's really good.
Yeah, exactly. All it takes is a few people to catch on and feel inspired by you. And you've offered so many nuggets of wisdom to us tonight. So
thank you.
Thank you, William. Let us know when you're next in Connecticut.
I'm close to there.
I know, we'll lure you out.
Okay, that would be great. And I'll tell you when the new book comes out, the Bucharest Legacy.
I know. please keep us in the loop. And these other book ideas sound very exciting. And your next one in June, that sounds fantastic. Please be in touch once that hits the shelves. So thank you everyone for joining. Oh, wait, I have another. Let's see. We have Jane Dean has a question. Let's see. Oh, Jane, it says I have to ask you to unmute yourself.
This isn't
There
a
we go.
question, it's a comment. I watch
Okay.
or attend author events voraciously, and I'm not a writer. This was actually one of the very best.
Oh, thank you.
Really, I'm not saying this to be, I'm not flattering you. This is honesty. If you knew me, you'd know I'm honest.
Thank you so
Jane,
And
much.
very
I loved
honest.
it, and I hope there's some way it can have legs, that seeing this again could be offered to other groups, because it was outstanding in so many ways. Thank you, William, very
Thank
much.
Oh, that's
I learned
wonderful.
a great deal.
Jane, can I put you on the spot? Can you maybe give me what set this talk apart? What made it special for you?
Well, you were very good together. I don't know how you found William to be one of the speakers, one of your authors, but I think you
How did we find you, William? Who did you come to us through?
Probably my publicist, Merrill Moss Media.
Right.
But at any rate, you're very clear on what the process. It was a primer on any young writer, any new writer could learn a great deal from. And the interviewee, whom I have met only briefly at the library, did an outstanding job. I just thought it was
Thank you. I think it was very helpful for you to be a writing teacher and a writer.
yes.
Have you considered teaching writing, William?
I will be at some point, because
Mhm.
can I just say something? I learned very little from writing classes, and I took a zillion of them. The reason is this, and let me just tell you, everybody, what happens in most writing classes? Everybody writes something like a short story, and then like 10, 20 kids in the class, they come to the class and everybody starts reading their piece. And then they all start giving their comments.
Mhm.
Now, the teacher, the writer, the real writer in the room rarely speaks in most of the classes that I had, or at least says a few things, but hasn't had time to read 20 short stories. Okay? And not only to read them, but to analyze them and tell the student exactly where he went wrong. And the fact that it doesn't have any form. Babbling, where's the form? Even a short story needs to have form, like a 3-act play, but in a short amount of time. So what happens is you get comments from all the other students. Well, what the hell do they know? They're here to learn. All they're giving is their gut reaction, emotional reaction to your story. Oh, I didn't like the character, or that is not helpful. What is helpful, unfortunately costs money, is to pay a few $1,000s to have an editor analyze your manuscript. And then you sit down and you go chapter by chapter, and they tell you, how to write. These are editors who used to be buying editors for publishing houses. That's where I learned how to write, more than in writing class.
Right.
Yeah.
It's especially difficult, I think, to learn to write, as you were saying, to learn to write a scene, to have a sense of escalation, to build to a moment where something changes, to make sure that you're not just treading water. My writing classes are a little different.
Okay.
I do. So my writing classes are, I teach at Westport Writers Workshop, which is a shameless plug. So we cap it at 7 students, and everyone brings in 5 double-spaced pages a week. They read them aloud, and so then we give feedback based. We start with what's working. So we try to emphasize, like we try to emphasize the positive in the beginning, but we definitely get around to like, oh, you know, that was, can you reread the second paragraph on the third page? Or, I mean, we have to guess where that is, let's say.
Right.
You know, I got a little lost there. Can you clarify this? And how does this relate to the pages you presented last week in terms of the narrative arc? You know, is there a consistency between the character? Does it feel like this is the same tone? Does it feel like the mood has changed? You know, we get into, we try to kind of look at the pages of the week on a granular level. We also try to kind of link them to what's preceded them. So and we have a great time. We have a lot of laughs. We try to keep it fairly light because I think writers are, you know, by definition can be very serious, and maybe there's a lot of self-loathing involved.
Right.
We do a good enough job of beating ourselves up. We don't need our fellow
Yeah.
students to you know, to chime in and pile on. So
Right.
yeah, so there are other ways of going about it, but I agree. I think having the one-on-one instruction, if you're really serious and if you can afford it, unfortunately, it does get pricey, but that is
Yeah.
probably a great way to jumpstart your career. So
Unfortunately, everything costs money. But think about it this way: how many thousands of dollars do you put into college? Can you honestly say you remember a hell of a lot from college? I can't.
I think
You know?
college is more about character building and
Yeah. But if you put in
right.
$5,000 with an editor to sit with you for, you know, a month process of analyzing your novel, that's worth it.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
it's I am also an editor, and I can tell you that there are a lot of times when students approach me and I can tell there's something, you know, I think in order to write, you do have to feel that you have something special to say. And that takes a certain amount of, you know, chutzpah. But I see a lot of students where, you know, they start out maybe without a great understanding of the mechanics and whatnot, but you can't write anyone off because people really can make leaps and bounds out of nowhere. It can just all start clicking in a really incredible and gratifying way. So
One suggestion that I found useful for me is learning, and not being a slave to it, but learning the structure of, you know, what is when is the first act over? What does that's the introduction of the character, the, you know, the decisive event, the change, and then you go into the middle part, and then the resolution and so forth. You know, helping students understand that even in a short story that happens. So I think just to have them keep in mind that general arc, and it's not just the arc though, there has to be a moment in the first act when you're showing the character in his normal life, and then something happens. What happens? Something happens to disturb his normal life. And then they have to decide whether to enter an adventure in this new path or not, or to just stay home. If he stays home, there's no book or movie. So when he decides to go on this new adventure, that's the end of the first act. And you enter the second act. The second act is ups and downs, challenges. You meet the challenge. The higher challenge each time you meet that challenge. So every time he meets a challenge, it has to be bigger than the last one. Okay. And then you finally reach a climax. Does he, you know, surmount that final challenge or not? I mean, you can have novels where you fail, but Americans don't like failure novels. So the protagonist usually succeeds, gets the girl, kills the other spy, whatever. And then the resolution is the character returns home, but a different person, a changed person. And we have to see that this is not the same person that started out the journey.
right.
So that's the general form, but you have so many variations inside that.
Right. Yeah. And I think in the very best books, the obstacles that arise are not just external obstacles necessarily. They're also come from foibles, you know, the character had, and that's part of the journey and that's part of the growth, which makes it so exciting.
Well, absolutely, because you have characters that think that they want the money, they want to be
Right.
wealthy, they go after the money, when really what they were after was love,
Right.
and they find that out when they get the money and the girl leaves or something, they find out that they were after the wrong thing all along.
Right.
So there's a lot of ways of showing character growth, and that's anyway. And then you have to think about if you're going to have 3 plots, when the main plot goes down in tension, one of the other plots has to be high tension in order for the reader not to lose interest, because you can't have a constantly intense plot. You have to go up and down. But when you go down in one, like the spy plot, the love plot becomes more intense. So the tops correspond to the bottoms of the other plot, and the tops of the other plot correspond to the bottom of the main plot, and so forth. So you're always having something happening. So you don't lose interest. And there's so many things you can go into.
It's easy. Piece of cake.
Yeah.
Oh, well, William, we're
right.
delighted we're delighted that you undertook that process for your fantastic book, and I hope everyone reads number 1, number 2 coming out soon. And I hope we hear from you in the future. This has been very illuminating. So thank
That's
you.
great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you to our audience. Have a lovely evening.
Okay. Goodbye. Thank you.
Okay. William, thank you.